If you happened to walk into the house at 135 Bahnhofstrasse in the city of Ulm, southern Germany in the spring of 1879, you wouldn't find any signs of a genius. There, you would find a boy named Albert with an unusually large head and a quiet, sluggish demeanor. While other children babbled papa and mama from an early age, Albert remained silent until he was 3 years old. His parents, Hermann and Pauline Einstein, once panicked and took him to a doctor, fearing he might be mentally disabled. But inside that sluggish exterior was a mind quietly observing the world. At the age of 5, Albert fell ill and was bedridden. To comfort his bored son, his father brought him a small toy, a magnetic compass. Albert held the compass in his hands, turning it left, then right. No matter how he twisted it, the tiny needle steadfastly pointed in a single direction: north. It was a fateful moment. The 5-year-old boy shuddered as he realized a shocking truth. That empty space was not empty at all. There was an invisible force, some magical hand lurking in space, grabbing the needle and pulling it. The trembling of the compass needle that day planted in Einstein's mind an eternal seed of curiosity about the mysteries hidden behind the veil of reality. The rest of his life, in essence, was merely a journey to find the answer to the trembling of that needle. Growing up in Munich, Einstein deeply despised Germany's militaristic education system. At the Luitpold Gymnasium, students were forced to rote learn, obey blindly like little soldiers, and were absolutely forbidden from asking questions. A Greek teacher once exasperatedly told him to his face, "Einstein, you will never amount to anything." He hated the authoritarianism so much that he decided to drop out of school at 15 and flee to Italy to reunite with his family, who had relocated due to a failing business. The teenage Albert wandered the Alps, breathing the air of freedom, and immersed himself in reading the philosophical works of Immanuel Kant as well as popular physics books. He decided to take the entrance exam for the prestigious Zurich Polytechnic, ETH, in Switzerland. His first attempt? He failed miserably. He scored excellently in math and physics, but received poor grades in history, languages, and botany. It took another year of preparatory school before he could step through the university's doors. Here, he met Mileva Maric, the only woman in his physics class, who would later become his wife and his first soulmate in his scientific reflections. Graduating in 1900, life poured a bucket of cold water on the young Einstein. Despite possessing an extraordinary intellect, his arrogance and habit of arguing with professors led to him being ostracized by academia. While his peers all received teaching assistant positions, Einstein endured long-term unemployment. He had to make a living as a cheap tutor, sometimes even going hungry. It wasn't until 1902, with the help of a close friend's father, that Einstein managed to secure a position as a technical expert third class at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern, Switzerland. Every day he sat for 8 hours in a small room examining designs for clocks, gravel sorting devices, or typewriters. A tedious job that was considered a failure for someone with a university degree in physics. But history always has ironic twists. The sheer tedium of this job turned out to be his greatest blessing. It was so easy that it took Einstein only a few hours in the morning to complete a whole day's work. The rest of the time, he secretly opened his desk drawer, which he jokingly called his Department of Theoretical Physics, to devour his wildest thoughts. And then came 1905, the year known in the history of science as Annus Mirabilis, Miracle Year. In his cramped apartment at 49 Kramgos, in the midst of the cries of his newborn son and the clutter of a life in poverty, the 25-year-old clerk unleashed 4 groundbreaking papers that forever changed how humanity views the universe. In just 1 year, an unknown clerk rewrote the entire foundation of physics that had stood for over 200 years. The European scientific community was stunned. Letters from eminent professors poured into the patent office in increasing numbers, seeking Herr Dr. Einstein, only to be astounded to discover he was merely a lowly desk clerk. After 1905, Einstein's fame skyrocketed. He left the patent office, became a professor, and taught in Zurich, Prague, and finally Berlin. But he wasn't satisfied. The special theory of relativity only applied to objects in uniform motion. It had not yet explained something incredibly important: gravity. Newton said gravity is a pull that draws objects together, like an apple falling to the ground. But how does that force transmit through empty space? For 10 years, from 1905 to 1915, Einstein struggled in his most painful and solitary intellectual journey. The necessary mathematical system was so complex that he sometimes thought he would go mad. There were days he locked himself in his study, forgetting to eat and sleep, hair disheveled, stomach in agonizing knots due to illness brought on by overwork. And then came 1915. He completed the general theory of relativity. His solution was as beautiful as a poem. Space and time are not just a static backdrop for events to take place. They are woven together into an invisible fabric. When matter, like the sun or the earth, rests on that fabric, it causes it to sag and curve. Gravity is not a pull, but the very curvature of space-time. But such a crazy theory needed to be proven. Einstein predicted that if space was truly warped by massive objects, the light from distant stars would bend as it passed by the sun. In 1919, British astronomer Arthur Eddington led an expedition to the island of Principe, West Africa, to observe a total solar eclipse and photograph the stars around the sun. The measurements perfectly matched Einstein's calculations. Waking up literally overnight, Einstein became the most famous person on the planet. Wherever he went, he was mobbed by crowds and sought after by kings, presidents, and Hollywood stars like Charlie Chaplin. He became a symbol of human intellect, a living saint of the 20th century. But brilliant halos often cast dark shadows on personal corners. His frantic immersion into science eroded his family life. His marriage to Mileva Maric grew increasingly stifling and bitter. They divorced in 1919. Einstein gave his entire Nobel Prize money to Mileva as a ransom for his freedom. In the years that followed, Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany. As a Jew and an internationalist peace activist, Einstein became a target for the Nazis. His books were burned in public squares. His assets were confiscated. They even put a $5,000 bounty on his head. In 1933, Einstein left Germany forever. He boarded a ship across the Atlantic, carrying the heavy heart of a refugee seeking the shores of freedom, America. In his final years, Einstein worked at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. There, townspeople would often see an old man with wild hair, wearing no socks — he absolutely hated wearing socks — and an old sweater, walking to his office or leisurely rowing a boat on the lake. Local children would sometimes even ask him for help with their math homework, and he would always patiently explain it to them. However, the outbreak of World War II thrust this peace-loving man into the greatest moral tragedy of his life. In 1939, upon receiving intelligence that Hitler's scientists were trying to create an atomic bomb, Einstein was persuaded to sign a letter to U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt. That letter warned of the risk of annihilation and urged America to develop the weapon first. That letter launched the Manhattan Project. Years later, when 2 atomic bombs rained down on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, claiming the lives of hundreds of thousands of innocent people, Einstein was devastated. Even though he had not directly participated in building the bomb, he still felt an unwashable burden of guilt. He told chemist Linus Pauling, "That was the greatest mistake of my life." In the years that followed, he used all his influence to campaign for world peace and nuclear disarmament. On April 17, 1955, Einstein suffered a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm. Doctors suggested emergency surgery to prolong his life, but he serenely refused. "I want to go when I want. It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go. I will do it elegantly." Early on the morning of April 18th, the genius took his last breath at the age of 76. Near his deathbed were several sheets of paper covered in unfinished mathematical equations for the unified field theory and an unfinished speech pleading for peace for the state of Israel. Up to his very last moment, he was still working for science and humanity. The life of Albert Einstein is not just a story about a man who discovered equations, it is an epic about human curiosity. A boy deemed foolish who refused to believe in dogmatic molds. A man who dared to use his imagination to ride alongside beams of light, who dared to bend both space and time with nothing but the power of pure thought. More than the theory of relativity, his greatest legacy to us is a reminder. Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. The brilliant and mysterious universe out there is still waiting, exactly as it once waited for that 5-year-old boy and his fateful compass.